I'm so glad you're here tonight. Thank you for coming. I hope you have something to write with. Bo is passing out a lesson to everybody. If you need one, be sure you wave him down there. This is part 5 of our Order of Pre-Tribulation events. And I really want you to listen. I hope I get to the end of this lesson because it has to do with, of course, where we live in the day and age. But again, if you have your Bible, go with me to chapter 38 of Ezekiel, and we're going to pick right up with our study tonight, okay? Chapter 38 of Ezekiel. We are in a study to answer the question, and the first blank is when. If you're filling it out with me, when the coming Northern Alliance invasion of Israel will take place. Mrs. Brown and I heard a podcast this afternoon, and this term was used incorrectly. I want to be sure you understand when this is going to happen, okay? You don't base it on what you see happening. You base it on what does the Bible say. So follow with me real careful tonight. We looked at the basic consideration of what Ezekiel 38 and 39 passages say that qualifies, is the next blank, that qualifies our answer. So we looked at those qualifications, and then 3 of the 4 major thoughts as to when the invasion will happen. Last week we looked at 3 of the 4 major thoughts as to when this will happen. Those thoughts were, in case you missed it, just a summary here, during the middle of the tribulation, during the end of the tribulation, and between are the blanks, the tribulation and the millennium. So the end, the middle, the end, and in between. We saw that none of these gave satisfactory answers according to the guideline that Ezekiel gave. None of those answers, and we tried to point that out to you last week, none of them were satisfactory according to what Ezekiel says the guidelines for this war will be. So let's look at the last consideration for this, and that would be the pre-trib view. And it's exactly what the word means. The view that the Bible, the next blank, is the Bible supports, is that this invasion will happen, and I really want you to understand, before, the next blank is before the tribulation ever starts. Okay, from Ezekiel 38 and 39, the view is seen from certain conclusions. Let me just review these. You know these, but let me just share them with you. Number 1, Israel is a state before the tribulation and living securely in the land. Of course, with all the others, they would have been too. Number 2, this invading army comes to Israel from the north during a time of security, again, before the tribulation. Number 3, this invading army is destroyed on the mountains of Israel before the tribulation. Now, I want to share with you some support. Why does the Bible teach this? Why do I encourage you to believe this? Well, watch carefully. Number 1, the picture Ezekiel gives us of Israel fits well with the nation as she is today, before the tribulation. And I'm really emphasizing this point. You don't have to wait for the tribulation to see what happened that Ezekiel has explained to you. The bullets under there, Israel's is a land brought back, the blank is back, from the sword. Look at Ezekiel 38:8. Now again, qualifications. It says, and after many days thou shalt be visited. In the later years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword. Well, let me share with you some thoughts. Now, this is a thorough evaluation, but after 1900 years, 46 invasions and the War of Independence, Israel is now free from foreign dominion. So God has brought this nation, his people, back from the sword. She has been gathered, the blank is gathered from many nations, verse 8 and 12. Reading the rest of verse 8, it says, and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste, but it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. I want you to take note here that the Jews there today have come from 80 to 90 different nations. They did a survey and just talked to the people of Israel. Between 80 and 90 different nations, the people that live there now have come from. The continual waste places, I want you to take note of that. If you go back in Israel's history, physically the land doesn't look anymore like it did. It was desolate. These waste places are now occupied as they rebuild and then turn these areas into modern cities. Okay? So this waste places are being changed. Again, all these things are set in place today. The next bullet, these people now dwell securely, according to verse 11, verse 14. Now remember, this does not mean peace. When the Bible uses the word securely in reference to this situation, it's not talking about Israel being at peace. Because Israel, since they've got in their land in 1948, has never been at peace. If that's what it meant, we're going to be waiting a long time. Okay, has been no peace. This security is due to what? Who remembers? They're what? Anybody remember? They're confident in their own strength. Those are the blanks. They're confident in their own strength. Now, that should be something that you should say, whoa, 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 whoa. They shouldn't be that way. No, they shouldn't. But that's what God is having you see. Let me help you understand. This is a picture of Israel today. Their army has fought four major wars since it became a state in 1948. 4 major wars. And has won each one of them very swiftly. Nobody in their wildest imagination thought that the war would be a 6-day war. That's the name of it. That's all the longer it lasted. It's been unbelievable if you look at that. Today, Israel is confident that her army is ready for any invasion from an Arab state. If you were to talk to an Israel leader, and I've listened to some on the news lately, they're very confident that they can handle anything that comes their way. There's no dependence on the Lord, and that's what Ezekiel is talking about. Their confidence in themselves. Look at the next bullet. Israel is living in unwalled villages. Verse number 11. Let me read that to you. It says, and thou shalt say, I will go up to a land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. If you visited Israel today, they don't have bars and gates. If you watch the invasion on October 7th, there's very little physical resistance. There's a Jewish word, and I can't say it, but the people just gather together to complement each other, to work together. They live in safety, and they're not thinking about armies protecting them. There's no walls. There's no, have to put your thumbprint to get in our city. It's just open air, and that's what he's talking about here. Number 2, the first blank is the word Russia. Russia today is still a major world power before the tribulation. Now, that will not be afterwards, is a very key point that nobody ever brings up. But Russia today is still a major world power before the tribulation. This has happened at the same time the land of Israel has been reestablished after World War II. You watch Israel after World War II, they begin to grow and to prosper. At the very same time, Russia was doing the same thing. Number 3, the pre-tribulational view best answers the problem of the, anybody can fill in that blank? 7 months of burying and the 7 years of burning. Now, by chance, if you don't know what we're talking about, Ezekiel 38 and 39 talk about after this war, it's going to take 7 months to bury the dead. That's how large a battle this is going to be. And 7 years to burn all the equipment that's going to be used. They won't even need to go into the field to get wood to burn fires. There's going to be so much. And so there is no conflict with any other biblical teaching if this invasion happens before the tribulation. But you notice last week when I shared this with you, every other opinion, there was a conflict. We couldn't find how to fit it in because it ran into another thing God already had planned. The Jews continue living in the land after this invasion, doing this cleanup work. They have to. If they're going to do what Ezekiel said they were going to do and clean up after this great war, they have to live there to do it. So it can't happen during the middle of the tribulation. At the end of the tribulation, it can't happen between the tribulation and the millennium. All these ideas were incorrect. Please see with the guideline of the 7 years of burning, this invasion, and the next word is must. This invasion must take place at least 3.5 years or more before the tribulation starts, because the Jews will be in their land for the first half of the tribulation. See, all I'm doing is going by the parameters that Ezekiel gave. When can I find a time that all these things he said fit in? And it's forcing us to go pre-tribulation. Not during, not in the middle, not after. It has to happen before. Okay, I want you to be sure you're following. Any blanks missed up to this time? I get a little excited starting to teach this and just go to reading. Sam? Did you all help him? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure who was that. Okay, any other? Okay, let's pick up then with B. Objections against this view. Why would people say this is wrong? Now follow with me because these are in error, but I want you to understand what they're saying. Ezekiel 38 and 39 are speaking of the restoration of Israel, not a time of war. Now, this is what somebody would say. Well, this can't be when it is, because Ezekiel 38 and 39 are speaking about Israel not in a time of war, but a time of restoration. Well, I really don't even follow the argument because he's talking about a war. But that is true. It is seen that this restoration is in, anybody remember what I taught you? It's in what? This is in unbelief. The war that's fought by the coming northern invasion is against a nation that is unsaved. The gathering of the Jewish people today is in unbelief. They're not going to Israel to gain their faith. They're going there because God is blessing that country and they can make a lot of money. Just write down. They're just going there for the fleshly reasons. Jews are returning, but they are not coming for their faith. They are coming for the confidence, and the next word is so important, and the prosperity of the nation. It's fun to read about Israel. It's fun to watch to them. Their scientists are coming up with cutting-edge stuff all the time that's ahead of the rest of the world. They're doing some amazing things, and I got to stay on my lesson because it's so easy to get off. When you read about that and you learn about what's happening in Israel, boy, that's the place to go. They're scientists, they're doctors. It's amazing what they're doing. Faith starts in Israel after this invasion. Because of what's going to happen, it's going to open the Jewish people's eyes, and they're going to start coming to the Lord. Notice the chronology of Ezekiel shows that the restoration of faith starting in Ezekiel 40 through 48. Does anybody know what Ezekiel 40 through 48 is all about? Oh, please, somebody raise their hand. Thank you, Mrs. Herbert. That's the picture of the millennial temple. 9 full chapters about what God has prepared for where Jesus is going to live and teach and be during the millennial reign. So the chronology of the book goes against the argument. Number 2, the term dwelling safely, the blanks are dwelling safely or securely in the Old Testament, this is the argument, always refers to the millennial peace and security. Therefore, this cannot be before the tribulation. Now, that sounds like a pretty strong argument until you get out your Strong's Concordance and do a little homework, okay? Please know that this is an overstatement. It is true that the term is used to explain life in the millennium. It is only used in a minority, though, of verses, not a majority, not all of them. There are at least 14, is the blank, references in the Old Testament where this is used not speaking of the millennial reign of Christ. This term, dwelling safely, is not speaking about the millennial reign of Christ. In fact, this is used more for is the blank, millennial contexts than millennial ones. If we want to add them up, I can find more that this term is talking not about it. Okay? So that argument doesn't hold any water. Now, if you haven't listened now, I really want you to get this last one real clear. And this is where a lot of people will go. This view, they would say, contradicts the teaching of imminency. Okay? Follow the thought. Please see, saying that something must, the blank is must happen before the tribulation. Please see, saying something must happen before the tribulation is not the same thing as saying it must happen before the rapture, unless it is held that the rapture begins the tribulation. So I'm going to go read back over that. I want you to be sure you get this, okay? Please see that saying, if you're arguing this, that something must happen before the tribulation is not the same thing as saying that it must happen before the rapture, unless you believe or unless it is held that the rapture begins the tribulation. Now, if you feel that way, then you better go there, okay? Remember, the beginning of the tribulation is not the rapture. Emphasis, red lights going off everywhere, preacher standing on his head, pointing everywhere. It's not, okay? It's not. But let me ask you, and a lot of you, what is the beginning? How do we know the tribulation starts? Let me read this here to you, okay? It says what? But the signing of a 7-year covenant between Israel and Antichrist. That's the only thing that starts it. There's a covenant. There's a promise. Antichrist is saying, yeah, you can have your peace. You can get in your temple. Everything's going to be really cool. Okay? It won't be. He's lying to him, but that's what starts this time clock of 7 years ticking. This view teaches Ezekiel 38 and 39 happened before the signing of the covenant. That's what Ezekiel's saying. This war that he tells us about happens before this covenant is signed, but this does not go against, is the blank, the teaching of imminency, because the rapture may well come before this. There's nothing that stops God from coming back, Jesus rapturing us tonight. If that would be the case, we're going to be gone before this war happens. That's all Ezekiel is saying to us. The view does not say that this invasion will happen before the rapture. That's not what Ezekiel is saying to you. It only says it will happen before the what? Tribulation. Very good. Ezekiel's writing to us. He was prophetically writing way back when he lived, and God told him to put this down. He's teaching us that this war is going to happen before the tribulation. He's not talking anything about the rapture. That's in God's time. He's not saying that. He's not making a point here. So the last bullet, the rapture is both. The little blank is both imminent and pre-tribulational. Okay? The pre-tribulational view says the rapture can happen at, what's the blanks? Any time between now and the signing of the 7-year covenant. And that's exactly true. It does not mean the rapture starts the tribulation. Now, I've heard people say that, but they have no biblical evidence. Now, it could, but there's nothing in the Bible they can say, see, it says that. It doesn't. In no way does the view go against imminency, since it is not the rapture that starts the tribulation. Okay? Now, in conclusion, I believe it can be seen that the pre-tribulational view is the only correct view. This means, most important sentence tonight, this means this invasion could easily happen during our lifetime. And I've heard people lately saying, yep, the Northern Alliance invasion is getting ready to happen. That is not true either. Okay? If you've listened to all the newscasts, they haven't said anything about Russia coming to fight Israel. Russia's in the bushes. There's some underlying currents, but that isn't what's happening right now on the world stage. Right now, it's a fight between Hamas and these nations around Israel. Now, let me just share something with you. Israel's going to come out looking like a rose out of this. Now, I know they've lost some soldiers, but in comparison to what the enemy has lost, no comparison. And since the truce, have you seen how fast things have been going in the last couple days? They're basically just wiping these people out. Now, I don't say that. I hope that it comes out correctly. I'm just trying to share with you what's happening, okay? I'm not saying they deserve it. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to share with you what's happening. God is caring for his people, okay? But watch what's happening. Israel's going to become more confident and more assured that they can handle anything. Now, that's when your radar should go, uh-oh, that's what Ezekiel said had to be for this next war. Things are going to happen in Ukraine and Russia, and things all of a sudden are going to line up, and Russia's going to say, we need what Israel has. Remember, why does Israel come? To get spoil. Very good, Ms. Brown. They're coming down to get spoil. They're going to be left desolate. They need oil. They need lots of stuff that Israel has. And of course, you know, Israel's a nation with no walls. They have no protection. We can handle them. Okay? All of this is beginning to line up, but to say it's going to happen tomorrow is not true, is not right. So the last sentence, this invasion of Russia will be another birth pang. And if I use that term, I hope you remember our lessons, a birth pang that occurs before the tribulation. In other words, this war that Ezekiel talked about is letting you know that the coming of the Lord is getting very close. Okay? That's all the lesson. Time's up. Any questions real quick before we call it adios? Okay? Hopefully this helps you. I want you to put things in perspective so that you're not bothered. You understand, what did Ezekiel say? Because I've heard news commentators say, boy, watch, the Northern Alliance war is going to start. And I think, no, that's not what the Bible says. Okay? So just watch and pray that God's will would be done with his people. What should you should walk away and say, boy, do I need to be a fervent witness for the Lord. Look at all that's happening. My friends need to know the Lord, because you see how fast this is happening. There's nothing says this is slow motion when it starts. So if there's somebody that's on your heart, somebody in your family, somebody that needs Christ, boy, be about bearing witness. Take them a lesson. You can have my lesson if you want it. Let's get a good witness to them.